enough Moslawis to serve as human insulation and cannon fodder, they imported them from surrounding villages, and the invisible presence of who knew how many innocents inside the apartment complex added to its menace. The place was ominous, in the literal sense. It issued omens of an extensive, filthy, many-angled fight. It was the sort of frowning pile you had to see only once to think, well, of course armed zealots would be shooting at me from there. The Iraqi troops had, with great effort and bloodshed, established a small headland of control in a district to the north of the access road, beyond the reach of the gunmen in the apartments. To get to this district, their convoys took a right off the road about 100 meters downhill from the embankment onto a partially paved side street that quickly degenerated into a dirt track. The neighborhood into which they drove, Gogjali, was as poor as Mosul got. About 400 miles north of Baghdad, Mosul is the capital of the governorate of Nineveh, the agricultural heartland of Iraq. On the Tigris, which bisects Mosul into its eastern and western halves, and near the borders of Turkey and Syria, the city has been a hub of trade, licit and illicit, for centuries. The results can be seen in Mosul's many mansions and its beautiful marble and tile mosques. Gogjali's mosque was a cinder-block box, its narrow streets unpaved, the privacy walls of its one-story houses still mud brick. It had been one of the first neighborhoods seduced by the jihadis, you heard. When the Islamic State's clandestine recruiters had started approaching Moslawis, whispering about an impending takeover, they had made short work of winning over people here. Look at those big houses down the hill nearer the river. You can live in one of those if you join us. Gogjali was now the beginning of the rear on the Eastern Front, the only battle front in Mosul where the fighting was steady. The Iraqi 9th Division, armored and stodgy and questionable, was probing tentatively about the city's southeastern edge, and the better, but not entirely dependable, 16th was somewhere close by, while the federal police and paramilitary forces were stirring around. But it was here in the east that the Special Forces formation leading the invasion of Mosul, the Counterterrorism Service, had put the first real puncture in the Islamic State's defenses. It was through this puncture that the main part of the Iraqi infantry, 10,000 strong, was trickling and would soon pour. The Islamic State had started life as an insurgency, using insurgent tactics, but now it was a regime, a government, even, in its way. It held territory. It had in Mosul Iraq's second or third most populous city, depending on who did the counting. And now it would have to fight a conventional battle over territory, one government versus another. Gogjali was also home to what, in those early days of the battle, was the Iraqi troops' only frontline triage station. What few CTS medics there were had taken over an abandoned home and an adjoining vacant lot. Every morning they set up shop in the lot, carrying out their gurneys and rolls of gauze and squeeze bottles of iodine and IV kits, most of it donated by foreign charities. Early one morning, the front line was just beyond the triage station. The pounding of airstrikes and artillery and the chatter of gunfire reverberated through the pall of dust and smoke and moist haze. The rainy season was beginning. The procession of casualties into the lot was already incessant. I arrived as a civilian caught in a shelling was carried in. He was put on a gurney. In moments, he was dead. His brother collapsed onto the body, weeping and hollering. He flung himself to the ground, still weeping and hollering, and now smacking himself. A CTS squad had been ambushed. A pair of bloodied soldiers lay on stretchers, too dazed to take note of the mourner writhing in the dirt beside them. A major was carried in by his limbs by 4 of his men as blood pumped from a gunshot wound in the rear of his thigh. Though clearly in excruciating pain, when a medic went to roll up the major's sleeve in order to put in an IV, the major got it in his mind the man was trying to lift his watch, and he sat up, wheezing and flailing his arms in protest. In the late morning, the fighting quieted.